Welcome back. I'm James.
I'm Steven.
And this is the Hope Shot. Man, we have a great story for you guys today. I met Steven a long time ago. We've been doing the recovery thing for a minute now, and there is not a man that I believe in more in recovery than this man here. So this is a special episode for me. I am truly honored and grateful.
Thank you.
So I just want to get to the story a little bit and let Steven share and tell us how you did it and what it was like and where you are now.
Okay. My name is Steven Zapinski. I'm currently 38 years old. Born in Illinois, moved down to Newport Richey, Florida when I was 2 years old, and kind of started my life there. You know, my story isn't unusual in any sense that many people experience the same thing, and I think it's important that we all get vocal about where we came from and what happened to put us into recovery and where we're at now and the great things that we're doing in our community. So, you know, I come from a great family. You know, a lot of times when we hear people that participate in active addiction, there's some trauma that follows it or that precedes it before it comes in. And that's what a lot of the theory is that causes addiction. Well, my family was very loving. I'm the youngest of 4 brothers and 1 sister. You know, middle class, went to school, was educated. You know, and it's throughout my life, no matter where I was, I just didn't feel right in my own skin. So what I would do, and it started at a very early age, I would try to morph and kind of be a chameleon in crowds. And I would do what it took to be able to fit in, wear that mask. And that carried on from the end of elementary school to middle school, and then eventually to high school. And what happened was I wanted to get with the popular kids because I was always in the shadow of everybody else.
Question, did you know that back then?
I didn't. You know, hindsight's 20/20.
Right.
And I thought that my behavior wasn't problematic because it was little things. You know, saying certain phrases or doing what the other kids did at the time, right? Just that was kind of the norm back then.
That's what I asked, because I didn't know either. Right? Like I feel the same thing as you, but I didn't know I was doing that.
Right.
You know, to fit in and the mask that we talk about. So
yeah,
I didn't know. So
yeah, the danger was in the not being aware of exactly what would follow in the future. You know, sacrificing my authentic self for somebody that I wanted to be perceived as. You know, that was a huge danger. So come high school, you know, I'm not going to give credit to any certain substance, but it started with what society deems as a more mild substance and, you know, socially accepted, so on and so forth. And it started there, and when I first ingested the substance, it was horrible. It was I had an awful experience. The reward was when I was accepted into the popular crowd.
Ding,
that
ding,
was the
ding,
reward,
ding, right? Yes.
So the experience of the substance was horrible, right? I got sick, the whole 9 yards. Went back to school the next day, and I was now part of the crowd, right? So that made me feel accepted. It was a false sense of acceptance, and I believe that day that happened, my true self went into hiding, and ultimately I experienced what's like a spiritual death. You know what I mean? Because now it was all about how can I fit in even more, right? So weekends would come around, I'd still go to school. Weekends would come around, I would go to these parties, right? My grades started slipping, and then eventually I was skipping school and eventually found myself dropping out in the 10th grade. So then it was just a blur from that point on. It was substance after substance after substance, and it just escalated.
Now, it didn't matter what you was using at that point. It was just different substances, like garbage can, we call it, right? Like
right.
Just willing to put anything in us to fit in and be a part of that crowd.
Whatever somebody had, if it equaled acceptance, is what I would do.
Okay.
Right? To the point where it was dangerous. It was like life-threatening at times. But I didn't see that. I thought, being young, teenager, healthy, I'm invincible, right? Now, before I was ready to admit that I had a substance use disorder, that would come later on, and we'll get to that in a minute. Other people were telling me, right? So the red flags were there, the warning signs were there. Other people were saying, hey, in a sense, you need to slow down or you need to stop, right? And you need to look where your life is headed. You're a bright young man, you know, you have your future ahead of you, but I sacrificed all of that. So eventually what happened was I got really, really deep into a hardcore substance and started doing things that I always told myself I would never do, right?
So yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, that ain't me.
Right.
Yet.
Yeah, that's not me.
Yeah.
Right. I'll never do that.
I'll never.
Right.
Right.
It just wasn't me yet. So here I am in late teens, early 20s, doing things that are just unimaginable, right? Just taking from my community, running the streets, up all hours of the night, just doing whatever it took to be able to get where I wanted to be. It was no longer about acceptance anymore. That had died years ago when I was in my early 20s, right?
Okay.
It was about the hustle, it was about the power, it was about the greed, it was about, you know, being attracted to the fast life, you know, and really...
That's addicting in itself.
It is. So now, you know, early 20s, I have this compound problem that stemmed from take it back to my youth, right? Not fitting in, feeling like I didn't fit in.
Mm-hmm.
And now has snowballed and escalated to the point where I am a criminal, doing criminal things in my community that has offered me opportunity after opportunity to be able to become successful, right? Didn't matter. I developed a disdain for the police department. Like anytime I saw a police officer, I thought they were bad news, right?
So quick question, because I heard you talk about your community offering you things to be successful. So my story, like running that lifestyle, you feel successful. Did you get that played image of I'm already successful? Look at me, I'm the big shot.
So that was a dream that was built on a sandy foundation, right? And it was, you know, I'm not blaming it on society as a whole because I have my own perception and my own independent thought process, but what happens is there were certain things that were glamorized. The money, the cars, the fame, the power, and that's the stuff that I found myself becoming attracted to. So in a sense, I knew, because I don't have a defective moral compass, and I never have, right? That just got buried. So in a sense, when I was going through all of that, I did not feel successful. I felt power driven.
Okay.
Right? And I felt like when I walked in a room, I had the power. Right? And that's what really drove me to do my daily activities, to do what I needed to do, to get what I wanted to get.
You know, it's funny, addiction, our mind tells us one thing about this power that we think we're getting. Meanwhile, it's like like a little piece of us is getting ripped off, right, at a time, and like we're literally losing our soul, right? Like I love how you said my moral compass wasn't gone; it just I buried it, right? Like that's what it does. Everything goes on that back burner, you know what I mean? And like, yeah, it's a beautiful way to describe what you're saying, and I'm glad we're touching on that. So people that aren't addicts, they're gonna watch this too, and they're gonna understand what an addict's mind does, right? It's for me, it was never about just getting high. It was always something else, right? There was so many pieces to the puzzle of addiction, man, and I'm glad you touched on it. So you're getting into trouble, the crime's happening. At what point do you start to think, man, I need to change something?
So I think I remember one time I had a pocket full of my substance of choice, and I was having this internal battle, and in my mind I cried out and I said, I want to stop. I need to stop. But then went in the other room, instantly, and did that substance, right? And I think the time came when, it's not when I had exhausted all resources, because a lot of people like to say they'll stop when they're ready, or they're just not ready to quit. Or, I mean, I wasn't. When it came down to it, and when we get into the recovery side of this, which is way more powerful than the addiction side of this, I was not ready to stop. There was not one bone in my body that was ready to stop that lifestyle. Yes, I was emotionally drained. Yes, I was spiritually bankrupt, right? But I did not want to stop. So I went, I mean, from 18 to probably like 25 years old was the main part of my criminal history that was, and I want to say this very clearly, that was a symptom. My criminal behavior was a symptom of my substance use.
Okay.
Right? So in other words, my pattern is, if there was a substance in me, it increased my chances of committing a criminal act.
Go ahead.
With those substances removed, that statistic was decreased significantly.
It's funny you say that, because I remember sitting in jail myself, and once, because that's now it's being removed, we can't do it, their lifestyle ain't there. And I remember having these conversations with men in there, and they were like glorifying the stuff that they did, right? And I was thinking to myself, man, we're not the same inside. I'm like,
yeah,
we're not the same. I don't belong here. And so like that, because of my addiction, it brought me to that level that you're talking about of criminal state. You know what I mean? Like, so I can totally relate with what you're saying there, and understanding that process of, man, we're not as bad as we are. I think we are.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, I was in both of my terms in prison. Multiple people in there were like, you don't belong here. Like the fellow inmates were telling me, you don't belong here. So again, I wasn't even feeling a part of, but that was a positive side of the not fitting into that crowd, right? They're like, you don't belong here. What are you doing? But I proceeded to continue, right? So I want to say it was around 25, I had got released from prison, and then from 25 to 30, there was like small stints in and out of jail, but they were only months apart, you know, and finally...
Now we're still using at this point.
Yeah. Oh, okay. It's progressing worse and worse and worse and worse, right? Like, no longer was I able to keep it together to hustle the substance to be able to maintain my habit. It was all about consumption at this point. So there was no longer me holding on to anything to be able to get rid of it to try to get the amount that I needed. It was just consumption across the board.
Okay.
So it had progressed, and like more and more substances, you know, had been added. So now at this point, it was the garbage can, and it was whatever you got, right?
Okay.
So I got arrested when it was May 22nd in 2013 was when I got arrested. And it was a loitering and prowling charge. I remember I was walking from the house I used to hang out at to the house that I was living at. And I was so just physically drained that I fell asleep standing up in the middle of the road, right? And then the police pulled up, and they knew who I was, you know, and they got me for loitering and prowling. It is an ugly charge, right? It sounds like just disgusting, but that's the reality of what happened. And then they found paraphernalia next to me, which was tested positive for the substance I was using.
Okay.
So then I was put in jail, and my previous stint in jail, somebody had said to me, why don't you ask for a drug court? See, now, here's another point that I want to bring up. I have got to date, I have 30 convictions of felonies and 23 convicted misdemeanors, right? 27 of those, the solution was incarceration. 27 of those felonies, the solution was incarceration. Never once did I know that there was a drug court. Never once did I know that there was opportunities out there to address my substance use. The only form of quote-unquote therapy or any avenue that I ever heard about to get help was through 12-step fellowships, right, that are available in the community in abundance, most of them, right? So I tried those, but it was only to satisfy whomever it was that was telling me they weren't going to assist me in anything that I did unless I did this.
Right.
Right? So it was never to go for my own self. And when I heard about drug court, and on May 22nd, when I got arrested in 2013, my brilliant mind did not want to go back to prison again. Right? Not that I couldn't take it, but I just didn't want to stop. I did not.
Prison sucks.
Yeah, and I didn't want to stop, right? Like, let's not get it confused. When I was in prison the first time, and even the second time, there was access to substances in there. And did I use them? Yes, absolutely, right? Found a way to do it. So anyway, I talked to my public defender, and I said, I want drug court. And he says, you want drug court? And I said, yeah. And I remember standing up in front of Judge Webb. Now, Judge Webb was the first judge that sent me to prison. The first time. He was either Webb or Andrews. Anyway, he sent me to prison before, and I walked in the courtroom for my court date, and I sat down, and my parents, who were always supportive, were sitting next to me, and I nodded out in the courtroom pew, to the point where the bailiff had to come over and tap me on the shoulder, and he said, you know, they're calling you for court. And my public defender advocated for drug court, and the state's attorney stood up, read the history of my charges, and said he's not deemed fit to be in society. He's a risk, right? And
Well, they got that one wrong.
yeah, well,
Just so you know.
Yeah, I mean, the history, again, like, it was being held against me, and it's not supposed to, but it was, and that's just the reality of it, you know, is that I've got this lengthy criminal record, and now I'm trying to advocate for drug court, and for whatever reason, and I've never had the opportunity to thank Judge Webb, he looked right at the state's attorney and he said, sir, if I've ever seen a candidate for drug court, it is this young man right here.
Well, if you want, you can shoot him a thank you.
Yeah,
Right?
Judge Webb, thank you for that opportunity.
He might get to see this one day.
Right, but at that time, I wasn't grateful for that opportunity. Like, this is how skewed my thinking was. I walked out of the courtroom, and as I pushed the doors open to wait for my next court date, I thought to myself, you got over on him again. I thought I was winning. You know what I mean? Like, I thought that's what winning looked like. And so anyway, I presumed what I was doing, right? I didn't want to stop using or that lifestyle. So I continued, and then I got a court date in front of Judge Crane, who is our wonderful, wonderful judge here in Newport Richey, who does drug court. And I went in his courtroom. Like, I almost didn't make it to his court because I didn't have a substance before I went. And I went in his courtroom. My parents were faithfully sitting next to me yet again, and I fell asleep in the courtroom. And the bailiff came over. He tapped me on the shoulder and he said, "Hey man, they're calling you for court." And I got up there and he said, "You know, today we're going to take you into custody." And I didn't quite comprehend what was going on because I was so just under the cloud of everything that I had done that got me to this point. I was inebriated. I mean, the whole 9 yards. So I went in to jail and slept most of the time, and then my next court date came. It was in like, I think 2 or 4 weeks, and I thought for sure that I was getting out to go to outpatient because it was my first time in drug court. I thought, you know, I definitely am going to get outpatient. But that wasn't the case. I went in front of him and he said, I'm not ready to see you yet. And he's like, I don't think you've had enough time. He's like, go back and then we'll bring you back again. So I was upset. I had an evaluation. A woman came in to give me an evaluation, and she was asking me these litany of questions, right? And I remember, like, I was on the phone because there's the screen and the plexiglass in front of us, and I'm sitting there listening quietly to every single word she's saying because I'm trying to outsmart her to get out of jail as quickly as possible. And I think one question she asked me that wasn't on that assessment was, do you know what you have to do for recovery? And I said, yes, of course. She said, well, what's that? I said, I just have to stay away from my drug of choice for 3 days. And I thought it was, I thought it was that simple.
That's great.
Right. That's exactly what I thought recovery was. I just have to make it through the psychological portion of it.
Okay.
So then I went back. I felt good about my little interview, my assessment. And I'm thinking, okay, when I go to court, I'm getting out, right? And I'm going to go to outpatient. So I go back to court, and they bring me up there. I'm in the little juror's box. And my public defender walks up to me, and she says, hey, the judge wants you to go to 6 months residential treatment. And I said, absolutely not. And she said, well, what do you mean? I said, absolutely not. I said, it's my first time in drug court. You know, I deserve a chance at outpatient. So I said, I want to speak to him. And she says, I don't advise that. And I said, sir, I want to speak to him. I'm talking to the judge now. And he says, I highly advise you to adhere to what counsel is telling you. And I said, I don't want to hear it. I want to talk to you. So I talked to him, and he said, all right. He's like, I will think about it. He pulls up on his computer, and he goes, sir, he goes, I'm sitting here, and you have 30 felonies and 23 misdemeanors. He says, you have two options today. You can either take 6 months in a residential treatment program, or you can take 2 years in prison. He says, I'm going to send you to the back to think about it. Well, he didn't need to send me back there. I already knew the decision that was going to be made, right? Mm-hmm. So he brought me back out, and I signed for 6 months residential. Now, it was still another like 30 days or 60 days until I got transported from the county jail to the residential treatment center in St. Petersburg, Florida.
So at this point, you signed up for the 6 months thing. So this is where recovery really, really begins for you.
This is where abstinence begins.
Okay.
Yeah, this is where abstinence begins. And the abstinence only began because I was removed from society, not by me volunteering to be removed, right? So there was an intervention with the Pasco County Sheriff's Office that put me in a situation where I had no choice but to be abstinent, right? Okay. So then I was in county jail for 3 months, and then I was transferred to a facility in St. Petersburg, Florida.
So now you're at the halfway, or the
residential.
Residential. Mm-hmm. Okay, so what I want to do, we're going to stop right there. When we come back, we're going to do a part 2 of what recovery looks like, and really, really go from there. This second part of the story is what I really want y'all to hear. Can't wait. This is exciting.
Yep.
Big things happen from this point on. Right. Can't wait to tell the story. So stay tuned for our next episode. Like, subscribe, comment. See y'all next time on The Hope Shot.